Karen gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white as she surveyed the empty driveway in front of her. This was the last straw. The UPS truck had been blocking her for over an hour, and she was fuming. With a huff, she threw open the car door and stormed towards the delivery driver, a fierce scowl etched on her face. "Excuse me," she shouted, her voice dripping with indignation. "I've been waiting here for ages. How dare you block my driveway like this? Don't you have any consideration for others?" The UPS driver, a young man named Tyler, looked up from his clipboard, his eyes widening in surprise at the woman's outburst. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I'm just trying to do my job," he said, his voice calm and measured. "Your job?" Karen scoffed, her hands on her hips. "Well, your job is clearly more important than my ability to come and go as I please. Move that truck immediately." Tyler frowned, sensing the situation was about to escalate. "I'm afraid I can't do that, ma'am. I have packages to deliver, and this is the only spot available. Maybe you could try parking on the street for now." Karen's face flushed with anger, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "The street? Are you kidding me? This is my driveway, and I have every right to use it whenever I want." She took a step towards the UPS truck, her hands clenched into fists. Seeing the woman's aggression, Tyler took a step back, his heart racing. "Ma'am, please calm down. I'm just trying to do my job. If you have an issue, you can call the company's customer service line." "Customer service?" Karen scoffed. "I don't have time for that nonsense. This is my house, my driveway, and you're going to move that truck right now, or I'll—" She never got to finish her threat, for at that moment, a loud siren pierced the air, causing both Karen and Tyler to jump in surprise. Red and blue lights flashed as a police car pulled up to the curb, its siren wailing. Karen's eyes widened in panic as the officer stepped out of the car, his hand resting on the holster of his gun. "What's going on here?" the officer demanded, his voice stern and authoritative. Karen's heart raced, and for a moment, she was at a loss for words. How had this situation escalated so quickly? She glanced nervously at the UPS driver, who was now standing with his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from the vehicle," the officer said, his gaze fixed on Karen. Now, what seems to be the problem here? Karen's mind raced as the police officer approached, his commanding presence filling her with a sudden, overwhelming sense of panic. She had never been in trouble with the law before, and the thought of being arrested or reprimanded filled her with dread. Swallowing hard, she tried to regain her composure, straightening her shoulders and squaring her jaw. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice quivering slightly. "This UPS driver has been blocking my driveway for over an hour, and I was simply trying to get him to move his truck." The officer raised a skeptical eyebrow, his gaze shifting from Karen to the UPS driver. "Is that true, sir?" he asked, his tone indicating that he was not entirely convinced by Karen's explanation. Tyler nodded, his expression somber. "Yes, officer. I'm just trying to do my job and deliver these packages. I understand the situation is inconvenient for the homeowner, but I'm not able to move the truck until I've completed my deliveries." Karen felt her face flush with embarrassment as the officer turned his attention back to her. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but you can't just confront a delivery driver like that. That's not how we handle these types of situations." "But, officer, Karen started to protest, but the officer raised a hand, silencing her. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back and let me handle this. If you have a problem with the delivery, you can call the company's customer service line," as the driver suggested. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but the stern look on the officer's face made her think better of it. Reluctantly, she took a step back, her arms folded across her chest as she watched the officer approach the UPS truck. As the officer spoke with Tyler, Karen's mind raced. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She had been the one in the right, the one being inconvenienced. Why was the officer siding with the UPS driver? Suddenly, a thought struck her, and her eyes widened with a mixture of panic and determination. "Wait, officer," she called out, her voice shrill and desperate. "This is a matter of national security." The officer paused, his brow furrowed in confusion. "National security?" he echoed, his hand instinctively moving towards his holster. Karen took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "Yes, officer. This UPS driver is up to something suspicious. I think he might be part of a terrorist plot." The officer's eyes widened, and he quickly turned to Tyler, who had gone pale. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle and place your hands on the hood. Now." As the officer barked orders and called for backup, Karen watched with a mixture of triumph and trepidation. She had done it. She had escalated the situation and gotten the authorities involved. But as the reality of her actions sank in, she couldn't help but wonder if she had just made a terrible mistake. The flashing lights of the police car cast an eerie glow over the scene as the officer forcefully escorted the UPS driver, Tyler, to the front of the vehicle. Karen watched, her heart racing, as the young man was ordered to place his hands on the hood. "Officer, I can assure you that this is all a misunderstanding," Tyler said, his voice trembling with fear. "I'm just trying to do my job. I'm not involved in any terrorist plot." The officer ignored Tyler's protests, his focus solely on securing the situation. "Sir, I'll need you to remain calm and cooperate. We've received a report of suspicious activity, and I'm obligated to investigate further." Karen felt a surge of triumphant vindication as the officer took control of the situation. She had been right all along. This UPS driver was up to no good, and now he was going to face the consequences of his actions. But as the adrenaline began to wear off, a nagging sense of unease crept into her mind. Had she really done the right thing? What if Tyler was telling the truth? The thought of being responsible for arresting an innocent man filled her with a growing sense of dread. Hesitantly, she stepped forward, her hands outstretched in a gesture of placation. "Officer, I understand your concern, but perhaps there's been a misunderstanding here. I'm sure Tyler is simply trying to do his job, just like he said." The officer turned to her, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Ma'am, you're the one who reported this as a potential national security threat. Now you're telling me it's all a misunderstanding." Karen swallowed hard, suddenly feeling the weight of her actions bearing down on her. "Well, I may have overreacted a bit. I was just so frustrated with the situation, and I suppose I got a little carried away." The officer studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, you do realize that falsely reporting a national security threat is a serious offense, don't you?" Karen's heart sank as the gravity of the situation dawned on her. "Officer, I didn't mean to. I was just trying to." "Save it," the officer interrupted, raising a hand to silence her. "We're going to need to take you down to the station for further questioning. You may have just caused a lot of trouble for yourself and this young man." As the officer moved to place Karen in handcuffs, she felt a wave of panic wash over her. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She had thought she was doing the right thing, but now it seemed like she had made a terrible mistake. With a sinking feeling, Karen realized that her entitled behavior and overreaction had spiraled out of control, and she was about to face the consequences of her actions. As the officer led her towards the police car, she couldn't help but wonder how she was going to get herself out of this mess. The stark fluorescent lights of the police station cast an unforgiving glare as Karen sat in the small, cramped interrogation room. Her hands trembled as she clasped them together, her mind racing with the gravity of the situation she had found herself in. Earlier, she had been so certain that she was in the right, that her righteous indignation at the UPS driver's inconvenience had been justified. But now, as the reality of her actions fully set in, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of regret and shame. The door to the interrogation room suddenly opened, and a seasoned police detective stepped inside, his expression stern and unyielding. Ms. Henderson, I'm Detective Gonzalez. I understand you've made some very serious allegations today. Karen swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. Detective, I didn't mean for things to go this far. I was just so frustrated with a UPS driver blocking my driveway, and I panicked. I never intended to cause any real trouble. Detective Gonzalez leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. That may be, Miss Henderson, but the fact remains that you falsely reported a potential national security threat. That's a federal offense that carries some very heavy penalties. Karen felt her heart sink as the gravity of the situation fully dawned on her. But I wasn't trying to. I wasn't thinking clearly, and I understand you weren't thinking clearly, the detective interrupted, but that doesn't change the fact that you've caused a significant disruption and put the lives of several individuals at risk. We take these kinds of allegations very seriously. Karen nodded, her eyes downcast. I realize that now. I'm so sorry, Detective. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just so frustrated, and I let my emotions get the better of me. The detective sighed, shaking his head. Well, Ms. Henderson, your actions have consequences, and I'm afraid you're going to have to face them. We're going to have to detain you while we investigate this further, and you may be facing some serious charges. Karen felt her stomach twist with dread. Detain me? But I didn't mean to cause any real harm. Can't we just? I don't know. Let this all go. Detective Gonzalez gave her a sympathetic look, but his tone remained firm. I'm afraid that's not an option, Ms. Henderson. You've set off a chain of events that we're now obligated to follow through on. I'm going to need you to come with me. As the detective rose from his chair and gestured for Karen to follow him, she felt a sense of overwhelming despair wash over her. She had let her entitled behavior and rash actions spiral out of control, and now she was facing the consequences of her mistake. With a heavy heart, she stood up and followed the detective, knowing that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The stark, clinical environment of the police station did little to calm Karen's frayed nerves as she sat in the holding cell, her hands trembling slightly. She had never imagined that her frustration with the UPS driver would have led her down this path, a path that now threatened to upend her entire life. As the minutes ticked by, Karen's mind raced, desperately searching for a way to undo the damage she had caused. Surely, there had to be some way to convince the authorities that her actions had been an honest mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment brought on by the stress of the situation. But deep down, Karen knew that her pleas would likely fall on deaf ears. She had made a serious accusation, one that had prompted a significant law enforcement response. The fact that she had later recanted her claim only complicated matters further, as it called into question the validity of her initial report. Suddenly, the sound of a key turning in the lock jolted Karen from her thoughts, and she looked up to see Detective Gonzalez standing before her, his expression unreadable. Miss Henderson, I need you to come with me, the detective said, his voice firm but not unkind. Karen rose on shaky legs, her heart pounding in her chest. Detective, please, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Can't we just forget about the whole thing and move on? Gonzalez shook his head, his brow furrowed with a hint of sympathy. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Miss Henderson. You've set in motion a series of events that we're now obligated to follow through on. As the detective led her down the hallway, Karen's mind raced with the implications of her actions. She had always considered herself a law-abiding citizen, someone who played by the rules and respected authority. But now, she found herself on the wrong side of the law, facing the very consequences she had always prided herself on avoiding. The journey to the courthouse was a blur, and before she knew it, Karen found herself standing before a judge, her heart pounding in her ears as the charges were read aloud. Falsely reporting a national security threat, obstructing a federal investigation, and making false statements to a law enforcement officer. The list seemed to go on and on, each offense carrying the potential for significant jail time. As the judge listened to the prosecution's case, Karen couldn't help but feel a growing sense of hopelessness. She had always been a privileged, entitled individual, someone who had rarely faced the kind of consequences that now threatened to upend her life. And in this moment, she realized just how much her own hubris and lack of empathy had brought her to this point. The judge's gavel brought Karen back to the present, and she held her breath, waiting to hear her fate. As the words bail and pretrial hearing reached her ears, she knew that her ordeal was far from over. The road ahead would be a long and difficult one. But in this moment, all Karen could do was brace herself for the challenges that lay in store. The days that followed Karen's arrest were a blur of court appearances, legal consultations, and endless waiting. As she sat in her lawyer's office, trying to make sense of the complex legal jargon and the gravity of the charges she faced, a sense of overwhelming dread settled in the pit of her stomach. Her initial bail hearing had not gone well, with the judge citing the serious nature of the accusations and the potential risk to public safety as reasons to deny her release. This meant that Karen would remain in custody until her trial, a prospect that filled her with a growing sense of anxiety and despair. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling with frustration. "How can they keep me locked up like this? I've never been in trouble with the law before. Surely there must be something we can do to get me out of here." Her lawyer, a seasoned criminal defense attorney named Michael, listened patiently, his expression somber. "I know this is a difficult situation, Karen, but the reality is that the charges you're facing are extremely serious. The judge is taking them very seriously, and they're going to want to ensure you don't pose a threat to public safety." Karen shook her head, her hands clenching into fists. "But I'm not a threat. I'm just a regular person who got a little carried away. Surely they can see that this was all just a misunderstanding." Michael sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I understand your frustration, Karen, but the law doesn't always take into account our intentions. The fact is, you made a false report that caused a significant law enforcement response. That's not something the authorities are going to take lightly." Karen felt a sense of helplessness wash over her. She had always been the one in control, the one who could make things happen with a snap of her fingers. But now she was at the mercy of a system that she barely understood, and the prospect of losing her freedom was a terrifying one. "So, what happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Well, the good news is that we're going to have another chance to argue for your release at the pretrial hearing. This time, we'll need to present a more compelling case, one that demonstrates that you're not a flight risk and that you don't pose a threat to the community." Karen felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. "And how do we do that?" "We'll need to show the judge that you're taking the situation seriously, that you understand the gravity of your actions, and that you're committed to making amends," Michael explained. "That means being completely honest, taking responsibility for your mistakes, and demonstrating a genuine desire to change." Karen nodded, her mind racing. "Okay, I can do that. I'll do whatever it takes to get out of here and make things right." Michael offered her a small, reassuring smile. "That's good to hear, Karen. It won't be easy, but if you're willing to put in the work, we may just have a chance at securing your release and getting you on the path to redemption." With a renewed sense of determination, Karen prepared herself for the challenges that lay ahead, determined to prove that she was more than just an entitled, impulsive individual. This was her chance at redemption, and she was willing to do whatever it took to seize it. The day of the pretrial hearing arrived, and Karen felt the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in the pit of her stomach as she was led into the courtroom. She had spent the last several weeks in custody, using the time to reflect on her actions and prepare her case for release. With the guidance of her lawyer, Michael, Karen had crafted a plan to demonstrate her commitment to personal growth and accountability. She had written a heartfelt statement, taking full responsibility for her false report and the destruction it had caused. She had also enrolled in anger management and conflict resolution courses, determined to address the underlying issues that had led to her impulsive behavior. As the judge called the hearing to order, Karen felt a surge of nervous energy. This was her chance to prove that she was more than just an entitled, reckless individual. She was determined to show the court that she was willing to make amends and become a productive member of society once again. When it was her turn to speak, Karen rose from her seat, her voice wavering slightly as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I want to start by apologizing for the tremendous inconvenience and destruction that my actions have caused. I made a terrible mistake, and I take full responsibility for the consequences of my poor judgment." The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. Karen took a deep breath and continued, "I understand now that my behavior was unacceptable, and I have taken significant steps to address the underlying issues that led to my impulsive actions. I have enrolled in anger management and conflict resolution courses, and I am committed to becoming a better, more responsible member of this community." As she spoke, Karen could feel the weight of her words, the sincerity behind them. She had spent countless hours reflecting on her actions, and she knew that true change would require more than just empty promises. "Your Honor, I know that I have a long way to go, but I am willing to do whatever it takes to prove that I am not a threat to public safety. I am prepared to submit to any conditions of release, including electronic monitoring, regular check-ins, or community service. I am determined to make amends and show that I can be a productive, law-abiding citizen." The judge listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. Karen held her breath, waiting for his decision. Finally, the judge cleared his throat and spoke, "Ms. Henderson, I've carefully considered the evidence and your statements here today. While your actions were undoubtedly reckless and caused significant destruction, I believe that you have shown a genuine commitment to personal growth and accountability." Karen felt a surge of hope as the judge continued, "I'm going to grant your request for release, but with a set of strict conditions. You will be placed on electronic monitoring, required to attend all scheduled counseling sessions, and perform 200 hours of community service. Any violation of these conditions will result in an immediate revocation of your release." As the judge concluded his ruling, Karen felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been given a second chance, a chance to prove that she was more than just an entitled, impulsive individual. With a renewed sense of purpose, she was determined to make the most of this opportunity and demonstrate that she was worthy of the court's trust. As Karen stepped out of the courthouse, the weight of the past weeks hung heavy on her shoulders. The journey had been arduous, filled with uncertainty and the constant fear of losing her freedom. But now, with the judge's ruling still ringing in her ears, she felt a sense of renewed purpose and determination. Gone were the days of her entitled, impulsive behavior. In its place, a newfound humility and a deep desire to make amends. The anger management and conflict resolution courses she had taken had opened her eyes to the impact of her actions, and she now understood the importance of empathy, self-awareness, and taking responsibility for one's choices. As she slipped the electronic monitoring device onto her ankle, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of shame. This was a tangible reminder of the consequences of her mistake, a constant tether to the legal system that she had once taken for granted. But rather than resenting the restriction, she embraced it as a symbol of her commitment to change. In the weeks that followed, Karen threw herself wholeheartedly into the community service work she had been ordered to perform. She volunteered at a local food bank, helping to sort and distribute donated goods to those in need. She also participated in neighborhood cleanup efforts, taking pride in the small but meaningful contributions she could make to improving her community. With each passing day, Karen felt a shift within herself. The entitled, self-centered woman she had once been was slowly being replaced by a more thoughtful, compassionate individual. She listened more, empathized more, and made a conscious effort to consider the needs and perspectives of those around her. As her pretrial hearing approached, Karen stood before the judge, her head held high. She spoke of the lessons she had learned, the changes she had made, and her unwavering commitment to continue on this path of redemption. The judge, impressed by her progress, praised her efforts and agreed to reduce the conditions of her release, a testament to the sincerity of her transformation. For Karen, this experience had been a humbling and profoundly life-changing one. She had learned that her actions had consequences, not just for herself, but for those around her. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined to make the most of it, to use her newfound perspective to become a better, more empathetic person. As she walked out of the courthouse, the electronic monitoring device a symbol of her past mistakes, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism for the future. She knew that the road ahead would not be an easy one, but with her newfound commitment to personal growth and accountability, she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way.